Good morning, everyone. We will start shortly, waiting for a few more people to join in. All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back for another week of challenge webinars as we continue our series for International Space Pitch Day and for the Allied Defense Accelerator program. For those of you who have not been on our challenge webinars last week, I'd like to introduce myself first. So my name is Brandon Florian. I am with Starburst Accelerator. We are the commercial entity working with the US DoD and the UK MOD to deliver this accelerator program, as well as the International Space Pitch Day in November. If you missed out on any of our challenge webinars last week, you are still able to go see them on our website, which we will post the link into the chat window within this webinar. But it allows you to go back, see everything that was recorded last week. So please go to our website, visit, register if you haven't registered yet, and hopefully you're able to see what was talked about last week. For this week moving forward, we have 3 more challenge webinars. So we have 2 today and then the last one on Thursday. So the challenge webinar for today, Synthetic Training Environment for Space Operators. It is going to be chaired by Flag Officer Luke Hilton from UK Stratcom. So with that, I will turn it over to him and he will start us off.
Hello everyone, my name is Flying Officer Luke Hilton. I am a Royal Air Force officer who works within UK Strategic Command, delivering space capability for ISR, PNT and SATCOM. UK Strategic Command is the capability integrator and force enabler for UK defence. It's headed by a 4-star general, supporting warfare in the information age and enabling the joint force. Our challenge today is that a synthetic environment that integrates space across multiple domains and provides training against realistic threats and opportunities using live data as a baseline and introducing hazardous synthetic situations. To aid in addressing this challenge and to answer your questions from industry, we are privileged to have a number of SMEs on the panel today. Let's start with Joe Gerber from the National Space Defense Center, Tony DeCarbo from the Combined Space Operations Center, Richard Bala from the United States Space Force, Lieutenant Colonel, what's his name? Sorry, we've had a last-minute replacement. Lieutenant Colonel John Fraser from the UK Army Headquarters, and Colonel Miller Belmont, the Chief Innovation Officer for the US 75th Innovation Command. Joe Gerber, if I might go to you first to introduce yourself. After you.
Pleasure. Thank you. Hello, my name is Joe Gerber, and I'm representing the National Space Defense Center here in Colorado Springs. Originally conceived as a joint exercise group, the NSDC's main mission is protect and defend of U.S. satellite assets throughout the space domain. This includes the rapid detection, warning, characterization, and defense against all manner of threats to our vital space systems. We work in close collaborations with many of the other groups here on the panel, as well as our intelligence partners. Specifically, my role is that of a mission director at the NSDC's commercial augmentation cells and the Sprint Advanced Concept Training Experiment Series. An aeronautical engineer from Purdue University, I've worked in the commercial space industry for more than 22 years. Previously, I was also a commercial space operator at the NSDC. This problem is significant because currently the NSDC does not have what we believe are sufficient modeling and simulation tools adequate to support the rapid growing threats in the space community. A decade ago, one might have argued that space was a fairly benign place where you had to worry mostly about debris. That is not the case today. As an example of the apparent tests the Russians have been making last week that you can read about in the news. So naturally, to be prepared, we need the ability to have a synthetic environment in which we can model, rehearse, and exercise a broad spectrum of conditions, including anti-satellites, electromagnetic interference, cyber attacks, co-orbital threats, rendezvous proximity operations, as well as many others. Currently, our synthetic exercise and experiment capabilities are very manually intensive. Single vignettes take weeks to develop, and they're very scripted, not very interactive. We don't have elaborate tools like the Army does for tank battle simulations. For those of you who may be familiar with OneSAF, the One Semi-Automated Forces emulation tools. For us, the analogy is like playing a chess game where you can only go one level deep in our fight, so to speak. Our synthetic M&S capabilities typically focus on one domain at a time, right? So we're exercising just electromagnetic, or we're just exercising a launch, or we're just exercising a cyber, right? In reality, wars are fought in multi-domains simultaneously, and we need a better way of doing that. It's also important that we have synthetic environments that allow us to measure the impact on the ground operations. The assets that we are defending are supporting space and conducting vital mission support to the warfighter on the ground. And we need to understand what that impact is to those individuals. How can I model these effects? Any interruptions to mission services throughout the rest of the battle space? What are the consequences, for example, of losing GPS? Or what are the consequences if, say, a Milstar satellite were to go down on the rest of the battle environment? And then, of course, naturally, how do I best adapt? So what we're really looking for are synthetic environments that allow us to experiment in all of those domains simultaneously, do so and develop vignettes efficiently, and model that with real world data to the best extent possible, so that the tools that we are developing and the techniques that we are developing emulate and model the real world to the best degree that they can.
Okay, Joe, thank you very much.
Back over to you.
Sorry, I think we had some feedback there. Joe, thank you very much for that introduction. Tony DiCarbo, can I ask you to introduce yourself to the audience?
Good morning, everyone from the United States. I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy in this COVID environment. My name is Tony DiCarbo. I'm currently the technical advisor to Major General Shaw at the CIFSEC. I also work with the Combined Space Operations Center, the CSPOC. Joe laid out a lot of my points, which is good. It's good to see that we have continue that tight tie. The difference, I think, between what the CSPOC needs and what NSDC provides. NSDC, as Joe said, provides the protect and defend mission. So CSPOC takes all the capabilities on orbit, as well as some terrestrial capabilities, and provides those capabilities, those space enabling capabilities, to the warfighter, to the pilots, to the naval officers, to the folks on the ground. So we provide all their position, navigation, and timing, the missile warnings, satellite communications. That's the purpose of what CIFSIC and the CSPOC does. It actually enables the operations globally. And that's not just a single unit or a single nation. We also provide and work with our coalition partners. Right now, I'm sure everyone's heard of Operation Olympic Defender. Well, there's a few signatories there. I know the UK and Canada are signed. I believe Australia is getting ready, if they haven't already announced that they're going to sign Operation Olympic Defender. So that's the true nature of CIFSIC. It's all of our coalition partners working together in combined space operations. Adding to that, we initiated the Commercial Integration Cell, the CIC. So a lot of, excuse me, the capabilities that we have right now depend on our commercial partners, and we're expanding those commercial relationships. So I just wanted to say a little bit, that's who I am, Tony, working for CIFSIC and the CSPOC, and the mission of CIFSIC. This challenge is, and Joe really hit a lot of it, so I don't have to reiterate a lot, but this challenge really depends on the capabilities provided, and the key, I think, is any predictive analysis, because with predictive analysis in these capabilities, we can develop vignettes and scenarios. Now, Joe mentioned the SACT, the Sprint Advanced Concepts for Training. CIFSIC and CSPOC participate in those as well as some coalition partners and some commercial companies. So you see there's a wide and broad range of individuals and countries and companies that come together for operations. That predictive analysis is going to enable us not only to figure out what may happen, but train the what-if scenarios, and also to help us understand what type of capabilities we would need to transition from one system to another, whether it's satellite communications, whether it's position, navigation, timing, etc. I think I want to cut it off there to provide a lot more time for our folks. If there's any questions, we'll handle those during the question and answer period, and back over to you.
Tony, thank you very much. Right, could I ask Lieutenant Colonel John Fraser from Army Headquarters to introduce himself, please?
Good morning, all on the call. My name's there we go. So I'm representing Army HQ, or Army Headquarters in the UK. We're principally deliver the strategic direction, the management, and the operational outputs on behalf of the British Army. So I think really I work with the Directorate of Information, so we're particularly focused on the services that are delivered to the warfighter and which we have to manage on behalf of the Army in order to deliver those particularly satellite-based services into the deployed capability with which we rely and operate within. I think from the satellites effects part of the piece, I'd say really where our main interest is the satellites effects that we would integrate into training. So as I said, we're principally a consumer of services from the satellite domain rather than one that manages it or operates in this domain, but we're heavily dependent on particularly the position and navigation and timing, and also within the services that we would rely on space-based communications. So we are really looking at this from the point of view of how we would integrate this into our current set of synthetic training systems, and how we would, the effects that would be generated through some of the vignettes that have already been discussed by the other panel members. And we're really sort of looking at that in terms of bringing the space domain into our effects-based inputs into not just our test and reference systems for the delivery of services, but also into our synthetic training environment, both from a staff training perspective, i.e. those that generate war games in which we can train and test our staff, but also into synthetic training, the synthetic training environments that we run our platform simulators off. I say simplicity is the order of the game, because we don't really operate, we're not after complex pictures, and more the ability to tune our systems and the experiential side of what those systems would look like if they were degraded or if they were impacted through a variety of effectors in the space domain. And really, we're interested more in integrating those things into rather than having a dedicated system itself. And I'd say within those systems currently at the moment, our challenges are that this is mostly done either by the rather crude elements of either switching off systems at source and denying it, or by a white card vignette insert, i.e. someone writes a scripted response which is pushed into some part of the training, which then initiates a response. Really been able to take some of the capabilities that have already been discussed by the panelists and been able to feed those effects into our other simulation systems is of key interest to us. I think at that point, I will stop and hand back to the panel, and we can take up any questions people have in the Q&A. Very much.
Thank you very much. Could I have Richard Bala from the US Space Force introduce himself, please?
Good morning, all. My name is Richard Bowler. I'm a Senior Technical Advisor for Science and Technology to the Director of Requirements for the U.S. Space Force here in Colorado Springs. It's very difficult to follow a great group like this because they've already told you so much information about the things that we're interested in here. But let me talk just for a moment about things that we call live, virtual, and constructive types of training. Live training is like when you're flying an airplane and that you're getting training back on a continuous basis from that. You also have an environment where you have the training in a simulator or something like that. We're interested in both of those, but we're also interested in a third type of training that we can bring in called constructive training, in which the entire environment is simulated for a crew or someone who is receiving that type of training. So with that in mind, I think I'd like to turn it back here. And the other thing is I manage 17 science and technology portfolios for U.S. Space Command here in Colorado Springs. So there's lots of things that we're looking at, lots of things going on in the environment right now, and looking forward very much to seeing what industry comes forward with in this particular environment. Over.
Thank you very much, Richard. And then last but not least, Colonel Miller Belmont from 75th Innovation Command. Would you introduce yourself, please, sir?
Colonel, you're muted. There you go. No. I think we're having some. I can barely hear you.
Right back with a microphone.
Got it. Okay. Well, while we're waiting for Colonel Belmont, I see that Captain Busby was able to join. Captain Busby from SMC, if you could quickly introduce yourself, and yeah, it'd be great for everyone to get to know you.
Hi, yeah. Captain Murph Busby. Call sign Murph, so it's not Murph, real first name. But in general, what I do is I support SMC via the SBIR pipeline. Specifically, I sit in the Mission Innovation Directorate of the Portfolio Architect. So a lot of what we do is actually connecting directly with our combat development division, so actually operators. I believe that's the value I kind of add to this panel. What we do is we actually go directly to the operator via these CDDs and actually source their pain points, a lot of which other companies coming through this or anyone on the line, being able to connect with those and kind of solve those are kind of really the strength of what my shop does. We also support SNC via the pitch days. So we were the team behind Air Force Base Pitch Day last year. And we're here supporting Jake and AFRL through this initiative.
Great, thank you, Captain. All right, Colonel, back to you, sir.
Brandon, can you hear me now?
Perfectly.
Great. Hey, sorry for the delay on that. So with respect to the training, it effectively breaks down into two specific audiences. So the first is our, I'll do my introduction. Colonel Miller Belmont, I run the space innovation team for the 75th Innovation Command. I have a team of FA-40s, aerospace engineers, and IT types that work primarily multi-domain operations and the fielding of the required equipment for that, primarily focusing on technical readiness levels 4 through 6, prototype design to field experimentation across that valley of death. I do basically the same thing in my civilian job and focusing primarily on assured position navigation and timing, as well as other multi-domain operation requirements for the Army. So with respect to the training, effectively we have two audiences. The first is your typical FA-40 community of the Army's space experts, and they work at a higher level of detail and technical knowledge. And the two main areas that they focus on are basically communications, understanding communications networks, understanding how to do link budget analysis, and how to do the field side of that, as in where to place your satellite ground stations, and exactly what it is you need to do to affect things on the battlefield and ensure you're able to properly move, shoot, and communicate. So at the lower level, the next thing they have to work on is assured position navigation and timing. We've basically come to the conclusion that that's probably the #1 threat we'll face on the battlefield based on foreign doctrine that we're aware of in current field experience going on across the globe as we're out and about. So from the assured position navigation and timing training, at the technical side, the FA-40 side for space operations, it's essentially being able to understand the equipment out there that it detects your jamming, but then being able to do the more technical planning required to make sure that the commander can do two things. He's got to be able to understand the battle space so he knows what routes are available, not available, where his danger zones are, and places like that. And the second part of that is the more technically complex side, which is returning fire and understanding how to target PNT jammers and disruptors and basics of electromagnetic interference. So that's the main categorization of required training on the space operations side. In addition to that, you get into other subcategories like imagery processing, other communication skills, and more of the refined GPS network analysis and things like that. Those cause conflict with our I won't say competing, but our fellow branches like military intelligence, combat engineers, intel, and the comms teams as well. But it's what we have to do to be proficient in our duties. The second aspect of training is for the broader force, the troops on the battlefield. And the #1 training that goes back again to assured position navigation and timing. And understanding that if you're being jammed on, one, recognize that you're being jammed on the battlefield. Second, what to do about it. And there are lots of things you can do without breaking your equipment or tearing it apart in order to make sure that you're getting a clean signal. And it's the basics of understanding topography and things like that. So those are the main training efforts that we conduct for the broader Army when trying to get the rest of this multi-domain operations under control as we move forward on a more technically complex battlefield. Over.
Colonel, thank you very much. Now, we've had an introduction there from all 6 of our panelists who've given you a brief outline of their area that they're interested in. Before we move straight into the supplier Q&A, I'm just going to put a question to each of the panelists, and I hope that they'll have a fairly succinct answer to the question that will hopefully will inform the suppliers going forward. So to each of the panelists, I ask this: how do you envisage this new tech, these new innovations being integrated into your current training? So I'm going to start with Joe. So Joe, how do you envisage this integration going forward?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're doing, particularly with the Air Force Research Lab, they have a agile software development team called Dragon Army. And what we are doing there is we're developing a lot of REST interfaces so that we can have federated modeling and simulation environments that we push data interactively to various modeling and simulation environments in order to develop a constructive environment. A lot of that also leverages very heavily the use of the Air Force Research Lab and SMC Unified Data Library, which is a data management platform that we heavily leverage to transact and share space situational awareness data with government and international and commercial partners. So the succinct answer to that is I envision a lot of federated mod sim environments that are exposed through traditional REST services in order to transact information with the UDL and Air Force Research Dragon Army products.
Joe, thank you very much. Tony DeCarbo, how do you see the integration of this new capability working in the Combined Space Operations Center?
Thank you. Well, I'd like to make a couple of assumptions to answer that question. The first assumption is that the capabilities that we will develop are going to be compatible with the partner SPOCs. When I say partner SPOCs, I mean like the UK SPOC and the CAN SPOC, et cetera. So with that assumption, and also Joe hit on another assumption, the UDL. The UDL is going to be pretty much a centerpiece of this capability. So I envision this capability actually being trained together with our partner SPOCs. So the capability comes in, I mean, we have a common operational picture. We see a vignette, the predictive analysis that I mentioned earlier. And you see that we can actually perform operations being trained, a training program. We have the training squadrons and everything here in the US. So we're gonna train these in a combined operation. That's how I envision using this tool. And it will be a tool in every sense of the word, because without really understanding the limits and capabilities that we have together, combined operations will be a struggle. I mean, we have a lot of great people and we're doing a lot of great work now, but this tool, a training tool to train combined operations, I see that's how to integrate the tool, the training, and operations together. I hope that answered your question, Luke. Over.
Tony, thank you very much. Lieutenant Colonel Fraser, how do you see new synthetic training being delivered into the training already developed and delivered by the Army?
So I think, as I said, to add to what some of the other panelists have already said, so I think the capability we would see is being able to utilize the training serials that are running that to generate vignettes, which are consumable into our synthetic training environments. So using the experiences or the real-time data that generates within this capability to generate standalone vignettes that we can export and bring into our training systems, rather than say, because we are consumer of satellite services rather than training our operators to manage it. So it's really about generating a database of vignettes which we are able to then bring into our synthetic training environments and consume and use in order to test in much the same way as Colonel Belmont said. Our key user groups in the NetOps community who deliver the network services, but also within the more broader parameters of our broader training audience, so they understand what specs look like on their systems, and it can be ingested into to demonstrate, so they are better able to recognise and then fight through any implications of effects on the space domain. Answer your question.
Okay, thank you very much, Colonel Fraser. I have a point from Joe Gerber he wants to come back in on.
Thank you, Luke. One thing I forgot to mention about this that's actually I can't underscore heavily enough. One of the things that we're doing, particularly with the UK MOD Pitch Accelerator program, is trying to integrate this into the NSDC and Department of Commerce's SAC-T events. And so what we'll be doing is we'll be providing an opportunity for each of these commercial teams on this program to work with us in this SAC-T experiment series. And we conduct the major experiments, 3 times a year, but we do rehearsals, once every 2 weeks. This is a great way for your teams to integrate and actually test some of these modeling and simulation or synthetic environment capabilities directly with us, integrated into our systems, hook up to the unified data library, collaborate with the Air Force Research Lab, and kind of demonstrate the efficacy of the tools being applied. Thank you, Luke. Over.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Could I have Richard Bala? Richard, how are you going to integrate the synthetic training environment into what you already offer in the US Space Force?
Well, I think that what we already offer is very limited in capabilities. So the objective of this entire effort will be to enhance the capabilities across the board so that there is training at all levels at all times, and that so missions can be tried out from top to bottom. Space operations by its very nature, and some of the things that we are doing, we just don't know what we don't know yet. So this is going to allow us to go in and try things out in an environment, where we can look at things and replay things and rerun things that we have never had before. So the major thing I would say is we want to be able to explore new techniques, new capabilities, and then put those into operations and enhance the capabilities across the board. Over.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Richard. And again, to Colonel Belmont, how do you see integration and innovation working in partnership with regards to synthetic training?
Okay, so the Army, basically, we can break down our training into 2 categories: under control and not under control. And the stuff we have under control is like imagery processing. We know how to do that. Basics of SATCOM link budget analysis, we're pretty good at. We do that for a living. And the basics of assured position navigation and timing. So where we're not under control is things like transporting imagery. For instance, the Army's preferred method of transporting processed imagery is FedEx. Okay? Exploitation of the UDL is a long ways away for the Army, because basically the way we do it is single point targets without a broader understanding of what the network looks like, and we fail to use available intelligence effectively. So all that comes down to understanding what's important. So with respect to a synthetic training environment, what we have to do is model an entire multi-domain operation, invasion, defensive posture, and from there be able to sort out, really, we have to use the synthetic training environment to understand what's important. And what's going to emerge then is going to be effective comms and counter comms and counter ISR. So that's where the focus is going to have to be, is probably on those 3 areas. And then the umbrella of that, of course, is understanding how the enemy is using space as we apply our technology to the battlefield.
Great. Thank you, sir. And then Captain Busby, how is SMC going to integrate synthetic training?
Well, kind of like what Mr. Bowler said, for us, it's a tie back to the operator. So we've already seen that operator training has changed. So someone like myself, or in my shop, any of our 13 SSO for us, a space operator. What's coming down the pipeline now is that the prior way we did train is no longer, I'm gonna say not valuable, but it shifted, right? So what we're seeing is more shared domain, ability to train operators from what they're going to see, and a shift on actually training them prior to when they get to their unit. So for us, it's going to be connect directly back to the operator, what they need to see, what they want to see, and what we haven't even speculated they might see are all things that we're going to tie directly back to them.
Fantastic. Thank you for that answer. Now, we're going to subject the panel to some questions from those people from industry who are watching. So, Brandon, do you have some questions for the panel we can put?
Yes. So we have a few questions that came through. Let's see. So one comment is, or question is, the challenge is very broad. For example, the British Army requirement looks quite different to the NSDC requirement. Would the sponsors welcome ideas that could address only discrete elements of the requirement?
Well, that's an interesting question. Where's that come from, by the way?
From Ian Pamplin.
Oh, I don't know who that is. Right, could perhaps we'd start with the Army. What is it that you think is what do you feel is so different from your perspective to everyone else's?
I'm sorry. Oh,
is that addressed to me?
Yes, sir, yeah.
I think so. I don't. I think, as I said, we're a consumer of services in the satellite space rather than some of the other panel members and organisations which are actively managing satellites. So I think from ours would probably be served by the fact that if you are running simulation systems in this domain that are creating creating vignettes in terms of some of the discussions that Rags mentioned in terms of some things we don't know, and as this system would then spit out lots more vignettes, which we could then feed back into our training environment in order to better prepare people for likely scenarios. So I think we are not necessarily after a simulator that we play in space, because we say we don't generally have the authorities or controls to do that, other than where we place our ground stations and point them at the sky. So I think and that in itself is very important. But I think I would see that there is sort of some linkages between if it was one system that we would want to exploit some of the libraries that would probably get created from the way in which the operators run the system or run their systems and play with the services and the ways in which they're the novel ways in which they might be either exploited or denied would feed into really useful vignettes, which then we would like to exploit from a library. Over.
Okay, thank you for that, sir. Brandon, what was the next question?
Sure. Next question. Do you envision contributions to these space domain awareness challenges, be they MOD, SIM, training, or data and analytics, as being delivered through a formal SDA element within the CIC at the CSPOC or other partner SPOC equivalents? Is the goal to demonstrate this capability under this accelerator effort and then follow up with customers after?
That's an interesting question. That's the sort of question I'd like to be able to put to Captain Singleton when he's on the line. Can we start with the Combined Space Operations Center? Tony DiCarbo, would you like to have an attack at that question?
Sure, thanks, Luke. So the CIC, that's a good question. The CIC currently is mainly SATCOM focused, and I said, like I said earlier, we're expanding the CIC, and I know the question mentions the SDA CIC. So I think, to be succinct, the bottom line is this effort, International Space Pitch Day, and the capabilities are to demonstrate a capability, a combined capability, because as I mentioned earlier, the Combined Force Space, or I'm sorry, the Combined Forces Space Component Command, CFSIC, is the conduit in which how all of our allies work with us together for combined operations. Joe talked about the SAC-T, and that's a great effort. We're part of that. And what that SAC-T helps enable is those combined operations. We also heard from both US and UK armies about how they're the consumers of the space capabilities that CFSIC provides. So this training capability, I think, would be demonstrated at first in a combined operation. And then after that success, I think we would then go to a next, and you're right, Luke, I don't want to speak for Jake, but then we would go to the next phase of developing a full capability with a sustainment trail for operations in the future. Now, that does entail user engagement according to the agile development process. So there's going to be user engagement, which is the customers, I think the question was relating to. And that's a continual process. And there was also I don't know if this was part of this question or another question about what a part of the capability. That made me think of what is a minimum viable product, right? I mean, we all understand how we develop minimum viable products to a minimum viable capability to enable whatever capability we're developing. So I think long answer to the question, I tried to be short, but I didn't make it, but long answer to the question is I think at first we develop and demonstrate an integrated combined operation training capability between at least the US and the UK, and then the follow-on efforts would be for sustainment. And again, that's not a government requirement. That's nothing to be, there's no contractual obligation there. It's just, I think that's how the process weighs out. I think that answered the question. If not, have the person just type in and ask another one. Over.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tony. Do any of the other panelists have a burning desire to give a response to that question?
Hey, so this is Regs, and I think yes. I think the question about should we bring forward things that only partially answer the challenge? Absolutely, because I think maybe Brandon would follow up on the fact that the object of the accelerator, the object of this going through this entire process is to look at things that we haven't looked at before. I talked about the things, the unknown unknowns, and that's what we have. What is the technology unknowns that we don't know about that you would like to bring forward that we might be able to take those and combine those with something else or combine them with something else that you have in your bag of tricks? But I think the answer is that's what we're here for. So bring those forward. Let's talk about them and let's see where we can go from here. Over.
Thank you very much, Richard. May I open the question up to the rest of our panelists and anyone like to come forward with a response?
Yeah, 2 points here. One, from an NSTC perspective, the on-ramp to any new technologies that we'll have will go through the SACT process and initially engage with the JTF, Joint Task Force Commercial Operations Group, and that's where we'll test out any of the new technologies. And it's a great place to do integration. And then finally, I think the answer to this is yes, we would, judge and evaluate any individual offering based on its merit. And there's a lot of actual overlap. For example, Colonel Belmont's, main concern here is GPS and guidance, navigation, and control. Well, that's another one of our main points as well, right? We're providing and supporting those critical mission systems, and so any degradation to those, has both an effect on our ability to maintain those space assets as well as his ability to continue the fight on the ground due to their degradation. Over.
Thank you, Joe. And then do Colonel Belmont or Captain Busby have any points they'd like to put?
We're kind of
Silence.
at the mercy of Joe Gerber and Kerry Turner's success with SACT for making sure we have good situational understanding of the battle space in space. So we wish them the best. If I were to offer any recommendations to them, I would say, well, first, they've done a bang-up job bringing in the commercial sector in ways that is far beyond what the Army has achieved in its ability to incorporate the private sector and its ability to bring order to the galaxy with respect to understanding of what's on orbit. What I would shift to once they've got a grip on that transition to state vectors and all that is their processing power to ensure that they've got maximum capacity to ensure that they can process the data as fast as possible. So maybe the Army can bring something to the fight on that side as we ramp up our ability to exploit machine learning and artificial intelligence. Over.
Thank you, sir. And Captain Busby, any points before we move to the next question?
No, nothing further to add.
Thank you very much. All right then, Brandon, let's have the next question.
Sure. So that discussion kind of segues into this one as far as machine learning and artificial intelligence. And how have the armed services looked at on-orbit processing as a means to get better intelligence where it needs to be faster?
Interesting. I think we'll just start sequentially with this one. So, Joe, can you provide an answer to that question from the NSTC?
How do I do that in this forum? All that I can say, here is, yes, we look at all those technologies. One of the big issues that we have, for example, is onboard image processing, right? And so, the more forward edge sensor processing that we can get, the better. This is, for example, we've got optical imagery analysis on orbit. Very often that has to be downloaded to the ground before we can process it. In some cases, if we can actually get that processing microized and then forward deployed at the sensor, we could significantly reduce our timelines in processing, and that would significantly help. To that end, we explore machine learning and AI in a wide variety of cases, particularly in anomaly detection. But we have a lot of room to grow in that area, so that's hardly a tapped market area. Over.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. Tony, do you have a view from the CSPOC?
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Yeah, Joe really hit the nail on the head. It's hard to talk about this particular question in this forum, but I think I can address it as for our providers. After the SAC-T experiments identify a few different types of technologies, when it gets to the operations, the combined operations we do at the CSPOC, it's really dependent upon SMC. I know we have an SMC rep there, because the SMC is the actual development arm. They have people who actually provide the capabilities to the CIFSIC. So I think once we identify technologies, like Joe said, once we identify technologies and demonstrate a particular capability, we would then turn that over to SMC, and SMC is going to be involved, obviously, along the way, to develop the real capabilities that we will use for the combined operation. So I think that's about, like Joe said, I think that's about all we can really discuss here at this forum.
Sure. Brilliant. Thanks, Tony. Now, Colonel Fraser from Army Headquarters, what's your view?
I don't think I'll be able to add much to what's already been said, other than to say that any novel solutions that allow us to get more bang for our buck out of systems that already exist, either novel techniques to get more from them, or to improve throughputs, particularly for communications bandwidth sort of service type stuff, would all be very welcome. But yeah, I think I'd draw the line there, because we don't generally get too involved in what sort. We ask for the service and someone else delivers it for us. So it's
usually UK Stratcom, right?
Experience area. I would hand it over to you, as you've probably got a better handle on it than me.
Thank you, sir. And we'll move on to Richard Bala from the US Space Force. What's your view?
Well, I think it's an interesting question, and you're right, it's difficult to answer in this particular environment. But I think what we can say is that in many instances we are concerned with the effects that we're going to get, not so much as how we get the effects. So if you have novel means of moving data or getting the data to the proper users and that type of thing, that's the type of things that I think we're looking for in the long run. So don't just think about the data itself. Think about the effects that we're trying to achieve with that data. Over.
Thank you very much, Richard. Now, Colonel Belmont, what's your take?
Well, it really comes down to the old joke from Good Morning Vietnam, where Robin Williams pretends to be the artillery. So we don't care what you play, just play it loud. And for the Army, we don't care where you process it, just process it fast. So it does not necessarily have to be onboard processing. It's really just a question of where can you process it fastest. From there, the next criteria is going to be the cost. And then the third criteria, whether it's cheaper to do it on the ground or from the satellite. And then the third is going to be your constraints on your ground infrastructure as to whether or not it's prudent to do it that way. But like going back to my earlier comment about FedEx being the primary means of transportation of processed imagery, you know, we got to get past this days to move data down to minutes and seconds. And if you look at history, you know, there's documented footage of the Soviets, or the Russians, spotting two battalions of Ukrainian mechanized and armored vehicles. And basically from when they spotted them to when they completely destroyed them, your timeline was about 10 minutes. So that's what we're looking at for processing time. That's the constraint we have to live with. So whether it's on board or not, it's got to be fast. And then other than that, from there, it's just a question of footprint and your size, weight, and power.
So thank you. Captain Busby from the SMC, can you come up with a similarly entertaining analogy?
I don't know if I can come up with an analogy quite that good. However, what I would say is definitely don't focus on the solution in a perfect box, if that makes sense. And I say that because the language that we push out in our open topics, you know, we specifically have asked before, bring us things that we don't know that we need. As others have said, it's kind of hard to really deep dive in an open forum like this. However, if you have a solution that you feel can aid either in operations, training, you know, on orbit, etc., and even if it doesn't fit in that perfect box, you know, bring it forward because we may be able to find you a customer that you weren't even tracking. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Brandon, we've pretty much run out of time. I think we've got about 1 minute left. Are there any questions that we could quick fire answer now?
No further questions, but I think I'd like to wrap all this up by just re-emphasizing to those who are listening that, you know, as Captain Busby said, and as other people said, they're looking for, you know, what the US and the UK are looking for are solutions and what they're not thinking about. So I would recommend all companies to not focus so much on the specific title of a challenge and say, well, you know, I'm not doing a synthetic virtual environment for space operators, so I can't really apply to this challenge. If there's a certain component that you believe contributes to the overall delivery of a synthetic virtual learning environment, or you know, some type of technology that you feel would be beneficial, we definitely encourage these companies to provide that input through a proposal submission. Again, you know, we are looking for all ideas, and you know, even though these are a cross section of some of the smartest people in the room as far as the UK and US armed forces go, sometimes we're not always thinking about what the next greatest iteration is of technology. So we definitely would like to hear from everyone. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Captain Busby, do you have any final comments or wrap-up comments that you'd like to share? No? All right. Well then, in that case, this will conclude this webinar for challenge number 4. We have an upcoming webinar at the top of the hour, so in about 5 minutes. again, if you are interested in participating in that, we look forward to having you. We will see you then. So again, the webinar 5 is, webinar 5 and 6, that's next week. So it is not, don't be confused with challenge 5 or 6 at the remainder of this week. Again, look forward to seeing everyone else on the remaining 2 challenge webinars at 9 o'clock today, and then on Thursday at 8 o'clock. So with that, we say farewell, and we will see you at the next one. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brandon.